Hi everyone, this is Alan Rosinski, Metro Manhattan office space. Good evening. I'm sure many of you are very surprised by the real estate market, the commercial real estate market in Manhattan. It's just so different from the rest of the world, and I think the only maybe somewhat similar city in the US is San Francisco, where there's very high pricing, scarcity, probably some similar challenges for tenants out there. I got a very interesting comment from a subscriber last week, and really it simply said, why is it such a hassle to find commercial real estate in New York City? And I'd like to answer that, but before I answer that particular question, I'm sure many of you are watching this channel because you do have concerns and an interest in commercial real estate. Maybe you anticipate leasing space or some office space, retail space in the future. And I'd like you, if you could, to please send me your questions, and I'd like to have the opportunity to answer them because I may not know your concerns. So the questions are really very, very helpful, and I promise I will answer them. But getting back to the question of why is commercial real estate in New York City such a hassle, there's many factors involved here. First of all, the rents in New York City are just extremely high. They can be up to $110, $120 per square foot for office space. And complicating the matter, you don't really even know what you're getting because the loss factors, the usable square footage versus rentable square footage, which is what the landlords call space, are very, very variable. So it gets very, very complicated. There is a rationale for loss factor, which I'll go into in another video, but it is a custom in New York which is not common in the rest of the country. Another factor, and there's many, is that if you're a relatively small business looking for space which is less than 2,000 square feet, there's a scarcity of small units in New York City. Because what's happened over the years is the market has strengthened since the recession, which I believe ended in 2009, landlords have combined smaller spaces. So there's very few small units, and the small tenants, for the most part, have gone to the co-working spaces like the Yard, WeWork. So maybe 10 years ago, if you were looking for 2,000 square feet in Grand Central, I would have been able to show you 25 properties. Now maybe there would be 5. So, I mean, it's frustrating that the selection is rather limited. Another factor which comes into play is competition for good spaces. There's a lot of tenants running around looking for retail space, office space, and if something is of good value, good location, a space in good condition, whether it's office or retail, medical, or loft space, it's not uncommon for the landlord to be negotiating multiple offers on a space at any given moment. So that does complicate matters. Another factor, which again is particular to New York City, is the commercial leases tend to be very, very complicated. They can be, with the institutional landlords, more than 100 pages. It doesn't mean that the terms are particularly difficult, but it means that the landlord has gone into great detail in the various articles of the lease, and it means you're going to be investing more in legal fees to have the lease reviewed. The cost of construction also comes into play. There's a lot of regulation in New York. There's unions here, and having any form of customized build-out can be very, very expensive for a tenant. Now, this is more of a factor for retail, where it's on the tenant to improve a space. So there's always, well, usually a certain amount of free rent. It's somewhat less so for office because landlords frequently will build out a space for an office tenant, assuming the term is sufficiently long. That's not uncommon, and often they have pre-builts which are of a configuration that are useful to many tenants. Also, when you're searching for space, you need a good broker, because if you don't have a broker who's knowledgeable about inventory in the market and who are the good landlords, you're going to get run around endlessly, and it's going to be a real hassle, and it's going to be a big time waster for you. And the last factor is often tenants are not quite sure what they're looking for. They're defining their requirement, which isn't really the best way to do it. They may need to go out with a broker a few times before they really have a better understanding of the market, and they can define their market, rather geography, budget, layout, and often these searches are a work in progress. I mean, I see this from a broker's perspective, and it occurs a lot more frequently than you think. So, and these are kind of the issues that make finding a space in Manhattan really a hassle. And what I will do in the next video, or maybe the next series of videos, I'll tell you what you can do to make it easier, to make it less of a hassle for a small business, professional, and any tenant to find space in Manhattan, or really this would apply to any market to some extent, any kind of complicated competitive market like New York City. So again, I really do encourage you to send me your questions. I do my best to answer them. If you could please subscribe to my YouTube channel, I would appreciate that a lot. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening.